Hi there, YouTube audience. I'm Angela Bixby, Energy Intuit, and I am here today with Dr. Suzanne Manser. And we are excited to bring you another episode of Psyched Conversations, a chat between a psychologist and a psychic. I'll just go ahead and jump right in and let you guys know what we plan to talk about today. We're going to talk about two topics. First, we're going to talk about stigmas in both of our professions and how that shows up and what that looks like. Secondly, we're going to talk about the topic of helping our clients and patients move through or hold discomfort, like just sitting in uncomfortable spaces. It's such a commonality for both of us with the people that we help. So we felt that both of these topics would be interesting ones to bring to conversation with you all today. In that second conversation about holding discomfort or holding ourselves in uncomfortable spaces, I anticipate that the topic of bypass will come up as a bit of a subtopic topic in that. So we're going to jump right in. All right, Suzanne, great to be here with you today. How are
Great to be here with
you?
you. I'm well. I am well. Thank you for asking on this
Good,
Friday
good,
afternoon.
good. Yeah, this Friday afternoon, late in the first month of January. Boy, I think we're all ready to move on to the next month here,
I love
2026.
it. Man, it's been a rough one.
Glad to be here with you. Suzanne, I am just dying to hear what the stigmas are for your profession. What do you encounter with the world about your profession or patients when they come to you?
Well, the I think the first way that stigma shows up because I'm a psychologist and a therapist is people not showing up.
Mm,
So many people have this idea that uh, mental health isn't really a thing, that
mm,
health is physical health. It's what you can see, it's what you can maybe physically feel, but mental health doesn't really exist. And so if you tell somebody that you're struggling with your mental health, or maybe you've been feeling sad for a long time, or you're really anxious for a long time, um, a lot of people, and I'm sure everybody's familiar with this, but a lot of people have that sort of like suck it up kind of attitude, just deal with it. And so there's this stigma about getting help with something that people think you shouldn't even need help with in the first place, if that makes sense. Um,
completely.
and even just the idea of emotions. So many people were brought up believing that, you know, being emotional is not a good thing. It means you're weak or something like that. Um, that you shouldn't have hard emotions, or if you have hard emotions, you should be able to get rid of them immediately or something. You shouldn't let emotions impact you. There's so much rhetoric out there about emotions and mental health that keep people away from therapy, that make people think that therapy is a crock, or that there isn't anything to address anyway. So just getting people in the door is kind of huge in terms of stigma. And then once people are in, it's really interesting. And I think this is where, and I hadn't really thought about this until this moment, but where stigma intersects with vulnerability. If you put yourself in a position and you've got some bias or stigma in your head about the position you're in, now you're feeling extra vulnerable, and people always feel vulnerable in therapy, of course. So it just brings that right up to the surface a lot of times for people, and that tends to make them a little bit more defensive than they might otherwise be. Um, Even though they sought out my services, suddenly they're questioning my skills or my expertise or whatever. Um, or they're just in a place where they can't make themselves say much of
Mhm.
import, and they just get real quiet because it just feels like they're doing something wrong. So a lot of the times stigma is, or the way I work with stigma once somebody actually shows up in my office, is just to get curious about where they got these ideas and get curious about what it would be like to explore some other ways of thinking about people or thinking about emotions. And that piece can take kind of a long time in and of itself before we even get to, the reason that the person showed up in the first place. So stigma shows up a lot in my office.
That's interesting. It's particularly interesting to then hear you talk about how if your patients are in that vulnerability and the stigma's kind of intersecting with that, and then they're sort of almost, it sounds like you're almost saying they go through the process right in front of you of sort of gaslighting themselves and quieting themselves down. It's fascinating. And I feel bad for the humans that do that. And I understand that these things happen, when people are in these different healing type paradigms that we're talking about. But gosh, yeah, I hadn't thought about that.
Well, and people, I'm so curious to hear about your end of it too, because obviously people have such strong, rigidly held beliefs about what's right and wrong, what's true and not true, what they
Mhm.
should be able to do, what they don't need to do, all of that stuff. And oftentimes my role is to help them break down those beliefs and kind of sort them out and look at, do you want to believe in this? Is this helpful for you to believe in? And then if not, what else, might you want to consider attaching to? So it's a real breakdown of very fundamental ways of thinking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I imagine so. You know what's coming up for me? I hope it's okay that I raise this, is, the old term shrink for a
Mm.
psychologist or psychiatrist, and how that ran through at least our Western culture for so long, that I imagine that is probably part of what people are, breaking down when they're working with you, right? Even this perception that you're going there to shrink your brain, right? Like they're just such negative connotations that are so unnecessary. Do you hear that kind of stuff still from your patients still?
I don't tend to hear the word shrink very much, but I do, there is this concept that I think comes from that. I maybe power dialectic actually, but this
Mhm.
concept of you're going to try to change me in ways that maybe I
Mm.
don't want to be changed. Um, and that obviously is couldn't be farther from my intent ever. But it is, I totally appreciate it. It's really scary to go into the office of another person when maybe you don't really understand what they're doing. You've not had the experience of it before. Maybe you don't fully believe it. And they're
Mhm.
asking you to essentially bare your soul and tell them your hardest things. And that's such an intimidating situation. So I so appreciate all of the defensiveness and fear that walks in the door.
Yeah, understandable, especially because they walk into you for their first appointment. Maybe it's the first therapist they've worked with. And then, yeah, the process of sharing what's on their heart, and you're a stranger to them. I can imagine so much comes up for humans. Oh,
Yeah,
my heart goes out to all of them.
yeah.
Fascinating.
But one of the reasons that I'm so sorry to interrupt. One of
You
the
go.
reasons I really was excited about this particular set of conversations, Psyched, is because from my end of things, there's a lot of stigma for psychology, and I imagine there's a lot of stigma for your profession as well. So I am so curious to hear how it shows up and how you deal with it.
Yeah, thank you for asking. Sorry, I'm laughing because yes, there are so many.
Yeah.
I
I mean,
decided
I,
to
I
narrow it
had some
down
of
to
it
two.
myself before I met you.
I'm sure you did. And I think I remember you saying that, like at your first reading that you had with me, that this was new to you and you weren't really sure how it was going to go or what I could see and all of that. So I narrowed down the stigmas because there are a lot, but I'm just going to focus on two today. Um, and the first one would be similar. Well, the first one would be that it's weird or that it's dangerous, I would say. There are a lot of people that have a belief that comes out of the religious cultural overlays that happen in our society, that if you work with a psychic or a medium, you're going to connect to the devil, essentially, right? And so, or you could stir up negative things and bring negative things to yourself by doing this. And so, generally speaking, people that do actually book in with me and have a session don't necessarily think that, but they might say, "Oh, my mom couldn't believe I was, going to a psychic for this reason," because perhaps it's part of a family member's beliefs, and so, by they've sort of got it by extension. So that's a big one, is that people just wonder if they're kind of stepping into the devil's work, if they're going to even go down this road. And we have religion, organized religion, and the patriarchy to thank for that, because historically we've burned witches and seers and oracles that are connected because the patriarchy is afraid of feminine power. So um, we understand why, but it doesn't mean that it isn't hard for people to kind of overcome that. And so I'm really proud in that. I will sort of toot my horn for a second here. I hear from my clients a lot. I've been doing this work in readings for 15 years this month. that they feel really comfortable and like nurtured. And that's where they call me things like, the psychic therapist, because they'll say, oh, I was so nervous. And I had this idea that there could be some weird, negative, dark stuff that would come up and it would affect me long after the session. And you put me at ease and you make it seem really normal. Right. So I make it seem really normal to people, which I think is a great thing because it does then help bring down their defenses, as opposed to them feeling uncomfortable and their defenses or fears in that kind of situation.
That
The
makes so
other,
much sense. It's
yeah,
so,
go ahead, sorry.
I was just going to say it's so interesting because I was not brought up in a religious household, as you know, and I never would have thought of that angle, just because that's not my background. So it's really interesting. I was expecting you to say other things, which I'm again curious to hear what you end up saying, but it's just really interesting to hear all of that.
Very cool. I'm glad that you're enjoying it. Yeah, it's fascinating. The other one, and this one I was wondering if you were going to share too from your industry, is that, but they certainly have it with psychics, is there's this perception that we're omniscient and we have access to everything, all the knowledge and all the things, and more so on a personal level that we can see everything. That we could, if they asked us, tell them what color undergarments they might be wearing. Sorry to go in a little bit weird, but right, or that we're going to tell them something about themselves that's deeply personal, and that whether it has bearing on their session or not. And so that I face not only in my practice with clients, especially if they're coming to me, and I have attracted over the years many, many, many first-time clients. I used to work in corporate America, so I think the way I present, people can relate to sometimes, and feel comfortable with, because I'm not wearing a black witch's hat, and I have a crystal ball, but it's not right front and center, right? So my presentation is more disarming than what they might fear, right? But still, they don't really know what it means to be psychic or what that looks like. And so most people just have no concept that we focus in on a certain topic that the client, and this is exactly why I design my sessions the way that I do, where I have clients bring questions to me. I am not one of those psychic mediums that does a big cold read. A, because I'm not really interested in reading people that way. B, I'm not interested in reading people that way because I want to be of most support and relevance to them that I can with my gifts. Like I'm not trying to prove my connection. If I wanted to read someone cold, I could go on and on about, a spirit guide here, a past life here, this and that, deceased loved one. And the client might sit there, this was always my logical thinking, and go, that's all interesting. That's not why I'm here. They might not be interested in those things. So I've geared my sessions towards really supporting that empowerment in the client so that they can bring their list of questions, and 95% of the time, I'm not diverging off of those questions because that's not what they're here for. And I feel like it's not respectful to go into too much. Now, there are times when things will come up a little bit outside of the scope of what they're asking about in the session. And I will say to them, Spirit's bringing through this big thing and it's kind of off topic. Is it okay if I bring it up? So again, I gain their agreement and permission before I just like blurt it out most of the time. Every once in a while, I'm sure there are probably some clients that'll go, there was that time that you popped in with something totally off topic. Anyway, so it happens sometimes, but by and large, I try to gear it more respectfully. So it's, education helps with that, but I deal with it in my practice and also personally. When I started developing psychically and left corporate America and started doing this for work, I had a lot of friends fall away. They just weren't sure what it was going to mean for our relationship. And more so, they weren't interested in this. They didn't know, they decided they couldn't still be friends with me. Right. So that omniscience piece, or thinking that we know everything by looking at someone, is big. And I've had friends that are psychologists that have experienced that sometimes too. Do you ever get any of that too?
I don't typically get it in session, and I
Mhm,
forget that people think that, but because I'm on social media,
mhm.
I will get comments about, oh, and I'm on social media in a way of being open about, what I struggle with and et cetera. And so people will comment about, wait a minute, you're a therapist and you don't have your anxiety completely figured out. That's, you must be a bad therapist. And then I'm reminded that, oh, right, that's yes. people have this idea that we have all, I don't know if they think we're omniscient, but that we have all the answers, that we know all the right things to do and we do them. And so our lives are just, kind of perfect and seamless and problem free, which is not true for any human on this planet. But yeah, the
Agreed.
idea that therapists have all the answers and kind of aren't subject to humanness or humanity, I think is definitely still out there.
Yeah, understandable. I get that a lot. People think it's hilarious. Oops, locked my keys in my car. Well, didn't you see that was going to happen? I get that kind of stuff all the time. The sort of renouncing of our humanness, as you so eloquently stated, with how you encounter people, less in your office and more out in the wild on social media and such, and their responses to your humanness. Yeah, interesting. Any others that you want to share before we press on to
Well,
the
I
next
was just
topic?
thinking about, um, and I'm not sure that there's much to say about this, but just kind of the concept of people being open about the fact that they work with a psychic or that they work with a psychologist. I've worked with you for it is now 7 years, and in the CPP program, and I've known you for even longer. And I don't know that I've told all of my friends. I don't know that I've told all of my friends. I actually have to think about that. And it took me a while to even be open with my kids. My kids are kind of young, but um, I am definitely still subject to worrying about what people think of me, quite frankly. And so when I'm not sure what people are thinking about the thing that I'm doing, it makes me a little nervous. And so anyway, in the last 7 years, I've gotten so much more comfortable with saying, "Hey, I'm doing this thing." And I'm realizing that the way I say it makes a huge difference. If I say, "Hey, I'm doing this psychic program, what do you think?" Then people are like, that's, hmm. But if I say like, "Hey, I'm doing this really cool thing, isn't this really cool?" People are like, "Oh, that sounds really cool." So the my acceptance of it makes a huge
Mhm.
difference in how other people, I think, receive it once I do talk about it.
Beautiful. I love hearing that. And you're right. How you present that and how you kind of lead with that energy, I might say from my lens, is going to lead others to be more open to what you're sharing. That's awesome. Yeah, I used to be more enthusiastic when people asked me what I did, telling them I'm a psychic. And with my maturity and evolution, I've just gotten a little bit quieter about it. It was mostly just not wanting to kind of upset them or make them uncomfortable. So I often defer to consultants a lot because I am a consultant as well with this work. So it's not, I'm not saying anything untrue. It's very true. Um, just until, I can kind of gauge their readiness to have those conversations. So yeah, I get it. I totally get it. I'm so glad you've been in this program for a while. I'm going to just take a minute and jump in here, not to do an infomercial, but just to clarify a little bit. So I'm a professional psychic medium. I do readings, I do one-on-one sessions, and that's sort of a lot of what I'm drawing from when Suzanne and I are having these conversations. Suzanne has also been a part of the Conscious Psychic program. It's a program that was born in 2012, that created in 2012. And it's an ongoing program that now has it's women only developing psychically and raising their consciousness through the program, really just through the regular meeting and repetition of development circles and practicing their skills and growing them and learning about them. So when she talks about working with me, I just wanted to clarify that for our audience, that you're in this the conscious psychic program, which is a little bit different than when I'm sourcing information and experiences from my one-to-one sessions for readings. Yeah. All right. So, this topic, as we've been planning what we're going to talk about, and the times we've had conversations, keeps coming up about this concept of sitting with discomfort. And I might say, just to kind of tee it up for you first, that, you know, I'll say generally, discomfort and being uncomfortable is unfortunately such a necessary part of human growth, right? And I think we all know that. But if things feel too easy or too simple or without a lot of hard stuff, we might not go that extra mile and change, right? Just generally speaking. And I think we see this in lots of areas. I mean, things like sports training. If you're an athlete, you've got to kind of keep doing the thing, even if it feels hard. So I think it's a concept that's a human concept. We can go so many places with this. Um, And so, yeah, I'm curious how it is that you help your clients specifically when they're talking about tough, deep emotional stuff, how you help them and support them as they move through the periods, the eras of discomfort in their healing.
That's such a good question and a complicated answer, as I know you know. People tend to come to me in discomfort. They come to me because they're in discomfort and they no longer want to be in discomfort. And some people come to me with the idea that I will take away their discomfort. And when I was a younger therapist, I that's kind of what I tried to do. I am by nature a problem solver and have not did not grow up sitting with discomfort organically or naturally. So my kind of default go-to is, oh, you've got a problem, you've got let me solve it. Let me, we'll do this thing and then you're going to feel better. And I think, unfortunately, for my early patients, that is how I addressed a lot of things. Thankfully, I have learned that actually isn't super helpful. You can teach a man to fish or person to fish, or you can give them a fish. I'm now into teaching them to fish rather. So when people come in with discomfort now, sometimes they are disappointed to hear that I'm not actually going to take it away. And that's not actually the purpose of therapy. The purpose of therapy is to help them learn how to manage their discomfort themselves, because as you said, discomfort is a part of being human. It has value for sure. And honestly, we can't avoid it. You can't avoid it. So to think that the point is to not have it is really missing the point. Um, so I do two things with folks when they come in with discomfort. One is kind of exploring the discomfort, getting to know it a little bit, being curious about it, wondering what kind of value it might have or what kind of message it might be sending or why it's there. Sometimes we get some really good stuff out of that. Sometimes it's just uncomfortable and there's no real anything about why. And then we work on managing the discomfort, which is essentially making room for the discomfort is how I talk about it. Man, there's so many different angles to kind of come at this from, but I work with people to, I guess, sort of think about emotions, the idea that discomfort is some level of emotion, that all emotions are uh, here for a reason, that they're valid, we that our job is to make room for them. So if you are feeling anxious, which is an emotion that I am very, very familiar with and is uncomfortable, if you're feeling anxious, the goal is not necessarily to not feel anxious, but instead to make room for that anxiety, to stop fighting with it, stop fighting against it, because the more you push against anything, the more it's going to push back, and you're going to feel that resistance and that hardness. So if instead you can work on, okay, I'm anxious, instead of focusing on the anxiety and trying to get rid of it, I'm going to allow it to be there. I'm going to not necessarily focus on it. Sometimes we'll focus on it in a particular way, but I'm just going to say, yep, I'm feeling anxious, but actually what's important to me is this thing over here. So yes, I'm anxious, but I'm going to really focus over here because this is where my value and my meaning is. Excuse me, my value and my meaning is. Um, and so yeah, it's about not fighting with it, letting it be there, recognizing that discomfort is a part of the human experience, and so it's about I'm saying the same things over and over, but yeah, letting it be there. I'm going to stop talking now because I'll keep
I
saying the
feel
same
you.
things.
You're passionate about what you do. You're really good at it. I get it.
Thank you.
Sure. I loved you describing, and even just with your hands, the value and meaning over here and the discomfort over here. If you don't mind my asking, so do you spend a lot of time in lots of situations kind of helping people or teaching people how to focus more on their values and and the value of situations versus the discomfort?
Yes, that's a really
Mhm.
good question, and I would say that's kind of well, a backbone of the work that I do is to be very aware of where your focus is. And how you're focusing on that thing, and then decide whether that's helpful for you, whether that's serving you in that moment. And if it's not, to put your focus somewhere else. Not that that's easy. The part of the work is figuring out how to do that. But
Mhm.
and where to put the focus, the somewhere else is often values because we all want to feel good stuff all the time, right? We want to feel happy, we want to feel excited, we want to feel joy, whatever. But those are all transient. Just like the harder emotions, the funner emotions are transient as well. They're going to come and go, and we don't have control over making them stay all the time. So if instead, or in addition, we focus on what we value, not just on what makes us happy, but what we value, that's always there. We can always connect to meaning and value. And so
Mhm.
it's a really useful source of focus and attention. It's sort of like if you don't focus on the discomfort, it might not disappear, of course, but it will be less in your face. It will be less sort of whatever this is.
Mhm.
Um, and then you'll have the energy and the space to focus more on the values.
Excellent. So it sounds like part of the process of patients working with you is empowerment for them and them learning how to sort of use their focus and their energy towards the topics that they really want to be spending their time and energy and focus on versus allowing the emotion, in this case, or the discomfort, which could be a lot of emotions, right? It's sort of taking over and driving their life. So it sounds like you help them get some objectivity when you can with the emotions too, so that they can kind of ground into their empowerment of sort of how they can move forward.
Exactly. I talk about it
Mhm.
as you getting in charge of yourself, that you need to be in charge, and then your emotions and your thoughts and everything else are sort of hierarchically underneath, so
Mhm.
that you can, again, notice what thoughts and emotions show up, decide which ones are helpful to focus on, and kind of let the unhelpful ones go. It is very,
Beautiful.
yeah, I never thought of it as empowerment, but yes, absolutely, that is very much empowerment.
Yeah, yeah. It's fun to hear you talk about your work and these topics because, and I guess this is part of why people call me a psychic therapist sometimes. I do that too. I used to work in healthcare right before I did this work. And so I encourage people to be a case manager of themselves, kind of like how you described being in charge and then the emotions and things are underneath that. So thank you for affirming the work that I do. Hearing you talk about your work, I'm like, okay, good. I'm glad I'm helping people in that way too. Very cool. Yeah, one of the big differences between my work and your work, generally speaking, when people are coming to me for readings, yes, I have lots of clients that come to me regularly. Not as maybe as regularly as you'd see a therapist. In some cases, if someone's working through something in their life, a big thing, they might have some regular sessions with me like that for a little while. And I'm always very clear that I'm not a therapist. Won't, haven't been, haven't ever been, will not be, and I'm not certainly in this role. So I make that very clear, to not misrepresent myself at all, even if they're coming back to me to continue working on something in a way that they may with a therapist. Um, but frankly, it's part of why I do what I do is so that I'm not necessarily as much in that role, right? To have to help them sit through and work through the discomfort. Of course, people come to me and they're in all kinds of discomfort for all kinds of reasons. And so, when they're looking at having a session with me and they're making that list of questions that the things that they do want to dig into, it gets a little tricky in that if they're not wanting to talk about the discomfort, I'm not necessarily naming it and calling it, right? Just sort of different
Mm.
purpose of our sessions so that I just don't always get into it as much as you may, right? So the way that I end up guiding people, and I was an energy healer for a very long time. I just stopped doing energy healings last year. Well, I was an energy healer for 12 years and a psychic medium for 15, something for 13 years, something like that. But so I do less of that work, even though I do help people with sort of self-healing tools, I might call them. Um, but I tend to, when people do ask me, is my point, when they're uncomfortable and sort of what they can do to help create change or shift some things that they're experiencing, my tried and true that I go to in terms of tools to teach them and remind them that they have access to, the number one would be grounding. And the way that I define grounding is really, yes, there's the science of we all are electrical and magnetic beings, just like the earth. We all have electromagnetic fields around us. And so, there's research on this, and I think it's called the Earthing movie that brings a lot of it forward, I think. and other research too. But this concept, I think it was somewhere in the 1970s or 80s when they started manufacturing rubber-soled shoes. And so as we humans, especially as Americans, but I think it goes all over the world, are walking around in these newfangled shoes, what nobody realized is that they were helping to disconnect us from the Earth's magnetic fields. They were not helping us stay connected to the Earth's magnetic fields in ways that more natural materials that shoes are made out of would. So they've done research to see that when people do either stop wearing those shoes or intentionally and consciously ground and connect to the earth and the earth's magnetic fields, that then their fields sync up with it and they have lots of things happen, like a lot more health. Sometimes anxiety goes away, right? Like sometimes really physiological diseases calm down, blood pressure gets better, things like that. And so there is, I don't have access to the research, nor am I citing the sources here, just giving it a general gloss over that there's that whole subject and topic of grounding that is science based. Thank goodness. I'm grateful for the science that's come up in the last 50 or so years with that. And that's a very real thing. And so when you think about even working from that with this concept of grounding, we want our fields to be sort of synced up with the earth. And we work with her fields and she works with ours. And that's part of how we do feel good and calm in our bodies and our brains and all of the things in our hearts. And so aside from the earthing piece of this, when I talk to people about grounding, it's also a little bit more deeply that quality of feeling like you're grounded in your body. Okay. I was hit by a car when I was 7 years old and had an out of body experience. And I was like in comas for some weeks. And so what I say, just kind of matter of factly, is I was literally knocked out of my body at a young age. And so when I went to psychic school when I was in my 40s, I realized how much you call it disassociation in your field, right? How much I am out of my body. And just naturally that way can go in and out easily because I was knocked out at a young age. So it's sort of been part of my norm for my whole life. And so I'm generally a grounded person. Yeah, I can be kind of spastastic and ungrounded like anybody. But it was a real big epiphany for me to learn, like, wow, I haven't been wholly in my body. Or if I get uncomfortable with something and I'm spacing out thinking about something else, I'm just easily dissociating or ungrounding myself, right? So bringing our energy into our body and feeling ourselves more at home in our body is a big part of what I call people to when they're asking for how to deal with discomfort. And people don't want to come in their body if they're going to feel discomfort, right? Um, and I am very empathetic and compassionate and say, I know it's not comfortable. And that is the key, right? Because when we call our energy in and we come out of those spaces where we're spacing out and not really wanting to deal with what's going on in our body or any of the parts of our body, our mind, all of the things, it's not helpful, right? We're not really being our whole selves. So I encourage people anything that they can do to feel themselves in their body, even if that means like taking a sip of water and just taking a moment to notice it going down your throat, eating a little food, feeling it begin to digest. Doing things like wiggling toes in socks and shoes or tapping feet on the ground to sort of bring that awareness of like, oh, here are my feet, here are my feet. Oh, good, I want to be in my body. It's fun. My feet are tapping, right? Or dancing, or exercising if that's their jam and they like to be in their body and moving their body and feeling its strength and such. So really any activity that's going to help you be happy and comfortable being in your body can ground you. It can help, it brings all your energy in. And then from that place, we can kind of exhale and then turn to whatever business at hand we need to deal with.
I love that. That's as you were talking, I just have to tell you, I was wiggling my toes and doing all the things. I was like, that does feel good. That does feel pretty good.
Good. I'm glad it's
Appreciated that. Thank
effective.
you.
Sure.
It's such a the concept of using your body as a grounding tool, as a tool at all is well, I was just about to say I'm curious. I'm going to ask you the question afterwards, but I'm curious about how much that is used in your profession. Because in my profession, it's used in different ways, and breathing and grounding. Um, One of the ways that I work with discomfort, or a tip that I use with people for discomfort, is a little bit different. Is a little bit different. Sorry, I'm trying to tie it in. I need to say it first. It's the idea of when you're feeling uncomfortable, so many people describe it as an overwhelming feeling. It just feels bigger than they are. It feels so um, just big and intangible as feelings are. And so sometimes you can imagine, just sort of quiet yourself, ground yourself, and let yourself really be in touch with that feeling, feel that feeling, but almost as if you're looking at it, and then get a sense of like, well, how much space is that feeling taking up? And what shape is it? And what color is it? And does it move? Does it have a texture? Does it have a sound? But asking sort of these physical property questions. I have this whole exercise that I take people through, and I have people look at their feeling and describe their feeling. And I mean, I think there's only been one time in the 15 to 20 years that I've been doing it that somebody hasn't seen their feeling. And it's so powerful to be able to say, actually, my anxiety feels like it lives in my chest and it feels like it's, a little bit bigger than my heart and it's yellow and it's radiates. Then you've got a picture of it. Then you can kind of do something with it, if that makes sense. You can kind of see the edges of it. And so it helps you to realize that it's smaller than your body. And so it can't be bigger than your body. Even if it feels overwhelming, it's actually sizable. And you can get a sense of like, okay, well, if it's this big and it, has this kind of a texture, this is what it would be like to touch it. This is what it would be like to look at it or to maybe even hold it. And that gives you a sense of mastery might be a strong word, but it gives you a sense of a way to relate to your feeling that's not that gives you a little bit of agency, a little bit of control. And that just having a little bit of the ability to sit with your feeling and not have it feel so big and so scary is really, really, really helpful, even if that's all that you're doing. It just makes such a difference in being able to have a different experience with it and not have it be so all-encompassing.
Absolutely. And I imagine it helps diffuse a little bit of that fear. With,
Yeah.
like you said, just a little bit
Yes.
of agency, it's like grounding your heel. And you're like, okay, I can stand here if my heel's dug in. And
Yeah.
and yeah, and then it builds from there. That is beautiful. I love that concept. And it helps them get objectivity and a little bit of distance, I might even add, to their
Hmm.
emotions. And then from that, they likely start to connect the dots of agency, objectivity. I am not my feelings. Yes, my feelings happen, but they do not define who I am, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Wow. So we're talking about discomfort. Great tip on how to help people feel more comfortable or to sit in discomfort. And talk to me about bypassing. Like, do you find that it's people's natural instinct to kind of want to bypass away from their psychology or their emotions, or how would you talk about that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it is for so many people an instinct. And it was my instinct for sure until I did my own therapy and took classes and all that sort of thing. Because as you said before, nobody wants to sit with discomfort. It's uncomfortable,
Mhm.
it's painful. And so I mean, I'm sure you've seen it too. I've seen people find 15 million different ways to not feel something. And the ways are so much more complicated and so much harder and bring so much more stress into their lives, but they don't have to feel that one thing. But as a result, I don't want to feel anxious. I'm going to drink a lot, for example, or use drugs, or I'm going to avoid people or whatever it might be. It might make you feel a little bit more comfortable in the moment, but you're not actually managing the issue or the problem or the feeling. So that's for me, that's the way I think bypass shows up most often in my office is people thinking that there's a way to solve the problem that doesn't have to do with actually facing and accepting the feeling. Because then it's still there, it's still motivating their actions and their everything else, but they're just not kind of looking at it.
Mhm. Understandable. Yeah, thank you. I'm listening to you and also analyzing myself and my process in live time and wondering if I actually help people spiritually bypass sometimes in my field, just listening to all that you help your patients with and your clients with. Yeah, super cool. So There's a big term in my field called spiritual bypass, right? And it's sort of this the concept that the love and lighters, the people that are wishing everyone love and light, are just trying to do that in lieu of really being real with situations, right? And similar to how you described it for your patients with uncomfortable emotions, and them sort of taking on a life of their own and the importance of not letting that happen, really gaining that agency, a little bit of that agency to start to work with the discomfort and start to break it down and then eventually kind of eradicate it to a degree. Um, you know, People do that in sort of a broader swath in a bigger way, I think, in my industry, right? Like, meaning people will come to me and they might be like, oh yeah, I had this stuff happen a long time ago, but I've worked it out. And then we're in a session and we're interacting and I'm seeing already that there are ways that maybe they're moving around that thing versus dealing with that thing. So I can sort of see in more be a bigger holistic way psychically what they are avoiding and things like that. And there have been lots of times where my guides will be like, tell them this, say this, hit it on the head. And so then I'll say, it seems like there's this thing that comes up. Do you work with a therapist? Have you worked on this? Yeah, I'm not a therapist, but Spirit's bringing this forward for you. And so if this is something that you want to work on, I think it's, a great idea for you to take it to a therapist and maybe talk to them about this and this. But generally speaking, it's more kind of comes in sometimes with the attitude and a lot of people believe that if maybe they go to a psychic and find out what the issues are, that maybe then they don't have to work on them, right? Or that there might be lots of ways in my industry. Let me do some energy healing. Let me go do some light therapy. Let me just exercise it out, right? Like they think that maybe they can just handle it with other things. And perhaps they can. But I agree with you in terms of if you're avoiding the emotions are still going to be there, kind of over there
Hmm.
gestating, waiting for you to look at them, right? So it's a term that's thrown around a lot, in my industry, and for good reason. It's a good thing to kind of call attention to. It's kind of like thoughts and prayers gets a lot of scrutiny, right? Because it just seems like it's just sort of something easy to say and there's really no action there. And are they even putting intention behind it if they're saying that towards someone's tragedy, right? Spiritual bypass is a little bit kind of in that zone and in that field. And it's tricky. I mean, part of why I talk about grounding into our physical body so much is because when I'm teaching psychic development, you know, it, I get people to think about our Eastern energy centers, our chakras, um, and how we have seven main in our body. And if you think about our bodies as like a pyramid, and the ones towards the bottom are broader, like the base of a pyramid, you've got to have that strong, broad foundation to be able to divine up here from the energy centers that happen up here and right above our head. And so I've always taught psychic development that way, that it's important to be really grounded in your body. And when people do that, that's when they've got to face the difficult stuff. And so I'm confident that the way that I teach people to connect psychically does not involve spiritual bypass, but for a lot of times people do naturally want to if it's going to be the easier path. They like to believe maybe that they can do that and it'll help things go away. So anyway, it's hard, especially when we sit in positions of helping people look at things from different angles. You know, I think sometimes people think maybe we're bypassing a little bit, but it is really us trying to help open them up to different perspectives. And I would say their multidimensionality, you might say different perspectives. Is that how you language it?
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, different
Yeah.
mindsets.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think there are ways, for us to keep addressing bypassing in the ways that we do, obviously, and helping people kind of come back to the thing and that it doesn't have to be so scary. Um, yeah, but it just felt like it had a place in our conversation today. Go ahead.
Yeah,
I
well, I
guess
was
I'm
just
running
going to
around.
say, for me, in my work, what I often see is uh, even while we're doing the work, somebody will emotionally bypass, and I'll point it out, and they'll tell me that I'm wrong or however they deny it. And then over the next weeks, it will play itself out. And
Mhm.
then we'll come back to it and I'll say, hey, I think, perhaps this is why it has played out this way. And so it's kind of it's an opportunity for people to see their emotional bypass kind of in real time and recognize why it doesn't work. why avoidance generally doesn't work if you're looking for a long-term relationship with yourself and your
Mhm.
emotions. So I don't know if if you get that opportunity of, and I know you said you do work with people on a regular basis sometimes, but I just realized that I'm feeling appreciative that I do get that opportunity to help people see when it happens and then have the ability to make a different choice next time.
Yeah, that's really cool that you get to witness that. Such an honor. Yeah. I do get to see that. I get to see that with clients that I work regularly with. I've seen it happen in one session and in an hour. I've seen
Wow.
people kind of go all around that and go, whoo, and come back to like, oh, I guess this really does have something to do with this, connect dots differently. And more so, I get to do it in the coaching program, this conscious psychic program where I work with people long term and then get to really, be sort of ringside with them on their spiritual journey as they're working through things like we're talking about and understanding those things about themselves. Yeah, it's such an honor. It's such an honor to be able to work with humans that are working really hard on themselves in the ways that they do in my work and my programs because the way the world's set up, people don't have to choose to do this work if they don't want to. You and I know the value of
Absolutely.
it. You and I are passionate about it because of the work that we do and working with humans and getting to witness humans grow and evolve and feel stronger within themselves and more agency. And I don't know, I just see it as a real honor anyway, which is how I think this project was birthed for both of us too, because we're like, oh, we love the work we do. Let's compare notes and teach other people about the differences between the two.
Yep.
Nice. All right. Anything else coming up before we close?
No, I'm just really appreciating I'm really repeating what you just said, but I'm just really appreciating the people in the world, and I guess I now count myself as one, but I didn't start off this way, the people in the world who are wise enough to know um that we have to make space for and even welcome in the hard stuff. Because that is a part of us, because there is value and because you can't avoid it. Um, And I think there's a lot of discomfort in our country, in our world right now that people are having a hard time holding, and rightly so, completely understandably so. I go through those waves, as you know, myself, and just appreciating that it's not. I'm thinking about the tip that I gave of, make picture the emotion, whatever, and obviously there's value in that, but thinking about the big discomfort and pain that so many in the world are in right now. Um, I just really want to come back to your grounding uh, suggestion and remind people that being in your body and trying to be present with yourself and with the emotion, but keeping yourself kind of primary is 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 the way. It's such a helpful strategy to be able to hour after hour, day after day, when the world is as painful as it is right now, just continue to move through and not let it drag you down. So I guess I just wanted to put another plug in for that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for saying that. I so appreciate it. And I think we can't say it enough. I agree with you. The other thing that's coming up for me is the concept of our breath as a method to keep us in our body. A reminder that if you are someone that easily kind of dissociates or, gets ungrounded and is in different spaces, really just connecting to your breath and observing your breath and being really intentional and conscious for just a couple of moments, I find that can really bring me right back into my body. And if you're focusing on breathing, then, there's not a lot of room to be focusing on the emotional pain or the mental pain or the overwhelm of the world on fire, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, it's both grounding and connecting to our breath. We're really connecting to our primal life force energy, I would say, our souls and our body. I mean, we're alive because we breathe. And so breathing is like absolutely, it might feel like a matter of resistance, especially if I sit here in a woman's body, even though I'm a privileged white woman. I understand that. I own that. I accept that. But, sometimes it can just feel like an act of resistance to just sit and breathe. And so, yeah, I would remind our audience that being in your body, grounding and connecting to breath are helpful pathways forward. And we can do this. I know we can. I know we can.
We are. We're doing it together.
Yes, we are. Thank you. Thank you. Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, audience. Suzanne and I are thrilled to be here with you as we say goodbye for this second episode of Psyched. We hope you all enjoy this. And remember, feel free to add comments, suggestions, message either of us if there are topics that you would like to hear us talk about. We would love to hear about that. Thanks for being here today with me, Suzanne. Have a good
My
weekend.
pleasure. Thank you for having me.